Tonight, Unwanted in America, a special investigation into international adoptions gone wrong. Some parents are packing up their adopted children and shipping them out.
I felt like I was not good enough to them. And I felt like, why am I even living in this world?
If I had to say the number of families that come to me and say, I don't want this child anymore, I would put international adoptees at something almost 50% of the families. 50% of them come and say, I don't want this child, we want them gone.
Kids being advertised over the internet, shuffled from home to home.
You were in an orphanage for 2 or 3 years, and then you come here, and then you go from this family to the next family. It's just, you felt like nobody wanted you.
So who's keeping track of all those children? No one.
We should know literally where every single child is. It's inexplicable that we're not doing it.
Unwanted in America, the shameful side of international adoption. Dan Rather Presents is next. Good evening. Since the late 1990s, Americans have adopted roughly 250,000 children from abroad. Thousands have come from China, Russia, India, and in recent years from poor countries in Africa like Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But no African country has sent more children to the United States than Ethiopia. And in an astounding number of instances, these adoptions have fallen apart. For a variety of reasons, the adoptive parents decide they can't deal with their new children. And young people who come to this country with little more than hope are soon being passed off from family to family in an underground network over the internet, and there is no oversight. That is the focus of our investigation tonight. We tell a larger story through the saga of two Ethiopians, Addie, who came to this country 6 years ago, and Samuel, the oldest of 5 brothers and sisters who were adopted to America in 2009. We begin this incredible story in Ethiopia, a land in the Horn of Africa, where parents and children still fight to survive. Ethiopia has seen 14,000 of its young citizens adopted to families in the United States since 1999. But it really took off in 2005 when actress Angelina Jolie adopted a baby girl from the country. Suddenly demand skyrocketed, and almost overnight, adoption agencies from the United States set up dozens of orphanages across Ethiopia. But many of the children aren't orphans as we know it, because often they have at least one living birth parent. The country is just so impoverished that parents are sometimes forced to give up a child in order for the others to survive. That's what happened to Addie, one of the children whose story we're following. We know a lot about Addie, but little about her birth mother and why she gave up her youngest daughter to an American family. We've come to the town of Sodo in rural Ethiopia, where our story begins. We're here in search of Addie's biological mother. All we have is her mother's name and a picture of Addie, whose Ethiopian name is Senite. We've been told that the mother sells vegetables on the side of the road for a living. We've checked several street corners and spoken with merchants in the area, but no one can tell us where she is. Finally, we meet a woman who says she recognizes the girl and knows where we can find her mother. She leads us to the main market, where the mother makes a living. Amid the chaos, a small, frail woman appears. Her name is Almaze. Seeing the photograph is overwhelming because until this moment, she thought her daughter was dead. The last time she saw her daughter was 6 years ago when she was taken to America by her adoptive parents. She hasn't heard anything from her since. We asked Almaze to take us home so she could tell us the rest of her story. Almaze lives on the outskirts of town. She spends her days in her garden growing vegetables to sell in the market.
Boqqolloo, arungaadee, arungaadee.
ለመኖር ያህል ይበቃዎታል ወይ?
ያው ለጊዜው ነው። ምን ይበቃ?
Almaze raised her entire family in this one-room hut with no running water or electricity. When Almaze's husband died several years ago, she was left on her own to support 3 children. But she was too poor to care for her youngest daughter and was forced to make a heartbreaking decision and put the child up for adoption.
A good condition gelisas. Awu bayna gisho tatarka dio gisho dafura pedindiraga tamarane shagara. Even gelisidora diceda bana ganne ola kesat.
Almaze wanted her daughter to get a good education in America, something she could never afford in Ethiopia. And her daughter was excited.
Tamarana, ayni anada tamarana dafura raka tamarana. Neka asabitam tadiko, enjereki konena kasa oltana. Tabana, timirte tamarana.
But Almaze thought her daughter would come back. She traveled to Addis Ababa to say goodbye and signed her parental rights away.
Yekas, zarada moisa makara yekasishi. Ay, yekike, afata dikut osikana katana. Tagodo, tumainesa. Tadinat yakadamagan o avada imachas. Kahaik enamalat osonaga. Gada gulbata da yekada.
Her daughter left in 2008. Almaze gave her what little money she had and a cell phone number so she could call her when she got to America. But Almaze never heard from her daughter or the family that adopted her again.
Dichiagetusi, ogeden nandishin, o dichiagetusi kahadara imes. Daro da franchata.
The story is the same in countless cities and towns across Ethiopia. This is the capital, Addis Ababa. We've come in search of a man named Nagasi. He is the father of Samuel, one of the children whose story we're following. We've learned that when Nagasi's wife died, he could no longer support his family and was forced to give up all 5 of his children. Samuel is his oldest son. We found him in a small shop crafting rugs that are sold in the local market. He told us why he decided to put the children up for adoption.
ጥሩ ይኖራሉ፣ ጥሩ ይለብሳሉ፣ ጥሩ ይመገባሉ፣ ጥሩ ትምህርት ያገኛሉ የሚለው ለወደፊት ለነሱ ህይወት የሚመራ አንዳች ነገር ያገኛሉ የሚል ተስፋ ነበረኝ አለኝ።
Nagasi's children went to an orphanage in Addis Ababa, and this video was taken when they arrived.
Samuel, do you like it here? Good.
The children spent a year there because Nagasi was waiting to find parents who were willing to take all 5.
We definitely plan to keep all 5 of them together.
Eventually, a family from Missouri agreed, and he met them when they came to pick up the children. Nagasi says he trusted them, and in October in 2009, he said goodbye to his children.
አጠቃላይ እንዴት ነው? አንድም ደስታ ነው፣ እንደገና ደግሞ በጣም ሆዴም ተረበሸ። እንደው መለየታቸው በቃ የተደበላለቀ ነገር ነበር።
Nagasi thought he'd hear from them, but he only received a few pictures and letters when they first arrived. But soon the letters stopped, and now we know why. The stories of adopted children are supposed to have happy endings when the kids leave for America. But the lives of Addie and Samuel were about to be turned upside down.
Okay, let's go one more time. 1, 2, 3.
It was never supposed to happen like this, but Addie and Samuel both ended up in Wisconsin, just outside a town called Holman, with the Steinhoff family.
This is how moms get strong, guys. This is how moms get muscles.
Despite her mother's fears, Addie is alive and well, now 18 years old and about to graduate high school. Samuel is Nagasi's oldest son from Addis Ababa. He is also now 18 years old.
Raise your hand if you want spicy. Raise your hand.
Rana and Rick Steinhoff are their parents, and they have an unusual family with 18 children, all of them adopted.
Thank you, Jesus, for the food. Thank you for everything that you gave us. Amen.
They've taken in foster kids, international adoptees, and special needs children. But 7 of the children that the Steinhoffs have taken in came to the family in an unexpected way. They rescued them after their international adoptions failed.
It's not about me. You know, it's no longer about me. It's no longer about my white picket fence. It's just not about that anymore. It's about kids that are struggling, kids that are hurting, and kids that need someone to give a damn.
So we dance.
It's something that's happened to hundreds, possibly thousands of children across the United States. And it happened to Addie and Samuel.
That's us. We arrived to America.
Is it scary?
I was excited and at the same time was a little nervous. The family, they had a lot of friends, and they're all like welcoming to us, and they were just funny and just, it was awesome moment.
Addie's new adoptive parents, Kayla and Kurt, lived in Columbus, Ohio. They adopted Addie along with a 4-year-old Ethiopian boy. Because Addie was older, her new parents had been warned that the adoption could be difficult, and almost immediately, Addie had trouble adjusting to life in America.
They kind of put me in a public school, the mom, and I didn't know anything about the English or I didn't understand. And the kids in school pretty mean to me too. at that time.
And life at home wasn't any better. Addie was struggling to find her place in her new family.
She was a teenager and came into a family where there weren't any teenagers ever. She was the oldest. And in Addie's birth family, what was she? The youngest. Okay, so she's the baby of the family and comes from Ethiopia, where she slept with her mom. All her life, she slept with her mom. She raged and screamed and hollered, and like I said, she had a right to be angry. She was mourning, and these kids have to mourn.
After Addie was in the house for more than a year, her adoptive parents discovered that she was ripping up her little sister's clothes. They punished her for it.
I couldn't come upstairs and eat the same plate as what they're eating. I have to stay in the basement and locked in the basement. There's a room and then locked in there. I can't get out. And I remember all those days. I just wanted to die, literally. I hated it.
Addie's adoptive parents started looking for help.
You look good.
Kayla reached out to Rana Steinhoff through an online support group for parents who'd adopted from Ethiopia. She sent Rana several desperate messages, and the two developed an online relationship. But they never met in person.
What is our biggest struggle with Addie? Jealousy. She's very demanding of my attention and then gets jealous when I spend any time with the other children. I've been very angry with her, and she has been with me, and this has been the thing that has caused us to come to where we are today.
After Addie had been a part of their family for 2 years, Kayla and Kurt suddenly announced she would be visiting a friend of theirs in Wisconsin.
I was like, what? Why? I'm going to take you to somebody's house, and they have a lot of Ethiopian kids. And I said, how long? And he's like, it's for a week.
But it wasn't for a week. Addie's adoptive parents were about to make a decision that families were making all over the country.
So that's when they got on the phone and they said, you will not be coming back here. The Steinhoffs have decided they will adopt you and they will keep you. And she was shocked. She had no idea. You know, part of her was relieved, like, okay, it was horrible there, I don't want to go back there. So part of her was like, okay, good, I like it here, I'm glad. And the other part of her was devastated because she was very bonded to the dad and she was losing him. So several times she had to call him and say, Dad, you know, can't you talk, and he'd say, I'm not your dad anymore.
A few months later, Kurt and Kayla came to drop off Addie's things and say goodbye one final time.
And when they drove away, she pretty much ran after the van. You know, Dad, 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 you know. It was horrible. It was horrible.
It felt like, I don't know, it felt like I was not good enough to them. And it felt for me, why am I even living in this world? If I just gonna keep switching families into families, and I don't know, I started being in depression. I just hated myself for that. For what they did to me, I just thought, I don't know, I just hated it. I just asked the God, why is this me? Why do I have to suffer? Yeah.
What Addie's parents did was not illegal. As her adoptive parents, they were able to simply write a letter and hand over their daughter to the Steinhoffs.
The person who had guardianship in Addie's case drafted a letter, signed it notarized, giving us guardianship. That can't happen. I'm safe, Rick is safe, but there are a lot of other people that might have taken her that wouldn't have been.
It's a practice called rehoming, or sometimes disruption. And one of the most common ways for parents to rehome their children is by posting online ads.
5 to 6-year-old girl from Africa, disruption. Seeking family for 11-year-old girl from Ethiopia. 11-year-old kiddo needs a family. 12-year-old girl from Ethiopia needs a family. Seeking family for 11-year-old.
They get on the internet, they get into chat rooms, they look at blogs, they look at websites, and they find other families who are saying, we like children from Asia, or we like children from the Ukraine. And they will contact that family over the internet, visit with them, and literally send their child to that family. No safety net, no services.
There are no official numbers, but it's estimated that as many as 1 in 10 international adoptions end in failure. Dina Matmayan is a counselor who specializes in adoption and works with families in crisis. She says that among her clientele, the rate is even higher.
If I had to say the number of disruptions in my practice for families that come to me and say, I don't want this child anymore, I would put international adoptees at something almost 50% of the families that seek my services. 50% of them come and say, I don't want this child or children. We want them gone. Every time a placement fails for a child, it is traumatic. Every time we move a child, we create some sort of harm. The harm of disruption is terrible. Is that cute? And when we say to a child that we've promised forever to, now you're going to a home and it'll be great. Oh, now you're leaving and you're going to a different home. We undermine their sense of well-being, their sense of worth, their sense of trust. We do so much damage.
There you go. That's your favorite picture, Gracie.
Addie is not the only child who was rehomed in the Steinhoff house. Samuel and his 4 brothers and sisters were also given away by their adoptive parents. You'll remember their father, Nagasi, who waited to find an American family who would adopt all 5 of his children so they could be together.
Look how small Faith was.
In 2009, they moved to rural Missouri. Their first adoption began failing almost immediately, and it only lasted 3 months.
They didn't treat us like their kids. That's why. They treat their kids way different than they did to us. Because we're different, I guess. Just didn't act like they wanted us to. We weren't what they expected. They might have been expecting like these wonderful kids and stuff. I mean, nobody's perfect. I mean,
Samuel and his brothers and sisters say they were isolated from the rest of the family, even on Christmas Day.
they celebrated downstairs by themselves. We weren't a part of it. They didn't even give us presents, so I don't remember Christmas at all. I didn't even know there was a holiday called Christmas then, because they didn't even say anything about it or celebrate it with us. So.
I think Sam freaked her out. She had girls at home. And here's this 13-year-old boy. And Sam snuck out his window and snuck in and got bread. He was the caretaker. He made sure that those kids were fed. He had to watch out for them. Dad wasn't there, you know? So he had to make sure that the kids had food. So for him to sneak out, you know, in the middle of the night and go get bread and hide it up in his room, to me, I thought that was incredible. I would have said, honey, here's more bread. She clearly wasn't prepared for it emotionally, so it didn't work out.
This is extra large.
The parents were so desperate to rehome the kids that they were even willing to separate them.
I know they wouldn't do that to their kids, separate their kids, you know. When you think about it, that's really cruel. Like, you can't do that to a family, just separate them, you know. That's like one of the worst things you can do to a family. You know, that's been overseas and away from all the other people they were around the rest of their lives, you know. That just showed me how much they didn't care, so. You can just hold my shoulder, I'm going really slow.
Rana and Rick agreed to take all 5 of the children in so they could stay together. They had met the kids when they adopted 2 of their own children from the same orphanage in Ethiopia. Rana and Rick drove to Illinois and met the kids in a McDonald's parking lot.
So I remember the girls running to me because we bonded even while we were in Ethiopia. When they got into the car, we stopped to get gas, and I remember Faith saying, "Don't stop. Don't stop. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't stop."
It was completely confusing. Like, it felt like hell. Like I'm just confused. Like, you were in an orphanage for like 2 or 3 years, and then you come here and everything's like sucks, you know. And then you going from this family to the next family. It's just, you felt like nobody wanted you.
Why do we go into adoption thinking that I don't have to stick with this? Why do we go into it thinking that? These are our kids. These are our kids. We signed up for this. We went over there and took them out of their country. We took them away from everything. You can't walk away. You can't just walk away. It's not an option.
No one knows how many children are being rehomed across America over the internet. Neither the adoption agencies nor the U.S. government keeps track of children on U.S. soil. Here are some examples of posts we found online by parents looking to rehome their children. They read, in part, "We are looking to rehome our son from Ethiopia. I don't like him very much. When I adopted him, I was not aware of his psychological issues. I feel unprepared to adequately parent him. We are in the process of disrupting 2 Ethiopian adoptions. I have been told that I should report them, but part of me is just wanting to get on with our lives." Some estimates have the failure rate of international adoptions as high as 10%. That could mean thousands of children shuffled around the country in an underground network of families.
We should know literally where every single child is, that every single disruption and dissolution and rehoming, if you will, should be reported and recorded somehow. It's inexplicable that we're not doing it. I mean, if a couple gets divorced and that divorce is entered into the record in a court, why aren't we keeping track of where these kids are going?
Maureen Flatley lobbies Congress on behalf of adopted children and advocates for stricter regulations in the adoption industry.
I would say this, if I, as a 65-year-old grandmother sitting with my laptop every night, can read the rehoming notices on Facebook and see where children are being effectively abandoned by their families, the state and federal governments can do it as well.
There has been a global effort to strengthen the regulations around international adoption, and an agreement written in The Hague was designed to add safeguards. The United States, along with 90 other countries, have signed on. Under the guidelines, agencies are supposed to report to the State Department when adoptions fail.
You have to have the reporting. And if people don't, I mean, we are not investigators at the Department of State. We don't do investigations in the United States. That's not our role.
Ambassador Susan Jacobs is in charge of the State Department Office of Children's Issues that oversees international adoption. A child is adopted overseas.
Mm-hmm.
The American parents go get the child, they bring it back to this country. Once they're back in this country, who monitors what happens to the child?
Most children become American citizens when they enter the United States.
Exactly.
And as such, they are not monitored. It's like who monitors a biological child.
So the answer is, once the child becomes an American citizen, then in effect nobody's responsible for monitoring.
Well, their
parents are.
Yeah, their parents are, and it's like your own kid. I mean, who monitored my kids? I guess if I had, beaten them or done something, Child Protective Services would have gotten involved. But otherwise, nobody's monitoring me. I mean, we can't intrude on people's lives unless they're doing something that is illegal or immoral or unethical.
So I'm trying to get my head around what can be done to, if not stop it, at least abate it.
Well, the states are becoming more interested, and they are passing laws that make it illegal to informally place children through the internet. I mean, they want to keep an eye on it. Children deserve our protection. I mean, who else is going to protect them? If their parents don't, then the government has to. We have to help them.
Earlier this year, the State Department implemented stricter rules for adoption, requiring that all agencies now be accredited under the guidelines of the Hague Convention.
I think we're more careful than we used to. I think I'm glad that international adoption came to a crisis point because it deserved and needed more scrutiny, more regulation, more care, more training. In my world, with my colleagues, we think of a disillusion as a bloodbath emotionally. You take a child who was not wanted for whatever reason, not chosen, not cherished, not kept. And then we lie to the child for years or months and say, you're kept, you're ours, we want you. You're never going anywhere, we're forever. And then after a while we say, oh, never mind. We're changing our mind, forever didn't mean anything.
Samuel and Addie have now lived in the Steinhoff house for 4 years. But they still worry that these parents could still change their minds.
I didn't call them mom and dad for a while. It just didn't feel right. You know, you're just moving to family, and you're like, who's really your family? Who's your real mom and dad? Like, I mean, you can't really trust people. You have trust issues when people treat you that way. So I feel like I spent half my life just trying to find the family, you know.
They signed so many sheets in Ethiopia. I was sitting there. They would not give up. Even she was sick. Even she was, I don't know. There's so many things signed. They said they will always be there until she's an adult. And they never followed their promise.
We reached out to the first adoptive parents of Samuel and his siblings, but they did not respond to our messages. Addie's first adoptive parents, Kayla and Kurt, declined our request for an on-camera interview, but sent us a statement to include in our story. It reads in part, quote, "We knew an older child could be very difficult, but we felt certain about the one we were drawn to. As time went on, the realities set in for her. She blamed me for all her losses and was angry that I was not like her Ethiopian mom. We messed up a lot when she was with us, but we were all just trying our best. We think she is in the best family for her. We love Addie and never wanted this to happen, but pray that she will heal and thrive and reach her potential in life." Unquote, Kayla and Kurt. When you take a look at the numbers for international adoption, you'll discover that it's a global billion-dollar industry. Every year, American parents spend hundreds of millions of dollars on adopting children from abroad, money that goes straight to agencies. And they are the ones in charge of putting children in the hands of new parents. So, the question is, are the agencies to blame when adoptions fail?
Any child that disrupts out of an adoptive family, I think, is a failure of us collectively.
Tom DiFilippo is the president of the Joint Council on International Children's Services. That's an adoption advocacy group that represents dozens of agencies. He points out that the vast majority of foreign adoptions are successful and says it isn't fair to only blame agencies when adoptions fail.
I don't think that you can point to Joint Council or necessarily an agency or the family. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you definitely can. I think that a lack of pre-adoption education is a problem sometimes. Some agencies do a fabulous job, some not so fabulous. I think also that unrealistic expectations of adoptive families sometimes, not really realizing or really truly embracing some of the issues that they're going to face.
It was a vision so inspired it would change the lives of thousands.
All over the internet, you can find ads produced by agencies that promote adoption.
It was a vision where every child has a home.
While the images portray smiling children and anxious new parents, critics say the ads gloss over the hard realities that go hand in hand with adopting, especially when it comes to older children. Now more than 50% of kids who come to the U.S. are over the age of 3.
If a family's expecting to get a sort of a sunshiny, bouncy little blonde 7-year-old girl with pigtails, and they end up getting a child who's been severely traumatized, who has perhaps a mother or a father in her sending country who she remembers quite well and wants to be with, I don't think anybody's going to get a good result in that process.
Here are the children waiting for us.
This is the adoption video of Samuel and his brothers and sisters that was given to their first adoptive parent.
Can you sing a song for us?
What the video doesn't show is how difficult it could be to take in these children.
Can you run? Let's watch.
And there were red flags right from the beginning. The new parents had never adopted before, and they already had 6 biological children in the house.
If you take 5 children from another country whose attachment figure died, they're transported to a land where they don't know anything about the culture, their skin is different, they are in an inexperienced adoptive family who doesn't know the first thing about adoption, that is so irresponsible. In fact, that is unethical. I'm not at all surprised that placement failed. Those children should have been adopted by a family that was really experienced.
The adoption agency was Children's House International. The executive director declined our interview request, but said the agency strives to educate parents before they adopt. According to its website, the agency was founded almost 40 years ago in Utah and claims to have placed more than 1,000 children from around the world. On its homepage, you'll find pictures of adoptive families and children, along with a lingering message, forever.
Yay, you're done.
Agencies are allowing families to be matched with children. I mean, they're the ones that are bringing the kids over and putting them in the arms of families, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. But let's make sure that these families are prepared for all of the possibilities. All of the possibilities.
I'm teasing you.
Especially if you're matching a family to a child that's 7, 8, 9, and up.
Little kids don't. Yeah, we'll wait.
Samuel's adoptive parents were required to do only 10 hours of training before adopting. They also attended a weekend seminar about parenting older adopted children. But the kids say that their new parents didn't know how to deal with them, mostly because they couldn't understand each other.
Like when we were there, we didn't understand what they were saying. We didn't understand what they wanted us to do, so we were just confused, and they're just over there just being grumpy and mad at us, you know? That didn't really help.
And then there's Christian World Adoption, an agency that was headquartered in North Carolina and put through Addie's placement. At one time, it was sending hundreds of children to America, but it turns out many of the birth parents didn't really understand that adoption was permanent.
They think that they're sending their children to educational exchange programs. They think that they're sending their children to live in America, but they will come home to visit. They have no idea that their parental rights are being terminated.
This is Senite to Des. She's 10 years old and in 3rd grade, and this is her mom. She has
This is the video of Addie that was made by Christian World Adoption when her mother agreed to put her up for adoption.
You are adorable. Could you, can you sing a song for us?
My mom thought if I come to America, I would send them money, like every month or couple months, I will help them with money. But I didn't know that's impossible.
I have raised her by hardship, so I would like her to be herself, to be strong and help me back in the future.
She would not let me to be in this position if she knew that no contact, no cell phone call. I thought that's possible too. If I knew that stuff, I wouldn't come here either. I really wouldn't, because I don't know, I just love my family too much to just come all the way here without no connection.
Between 1999 and 2011, Christian World Adoption brought in hundreds of children like Addie, and we have no idea how many of them have been rehomed. The agency shut down last year after allegations of fraud and corruption. This was a big money operation. The foundation that ran the agency once had assets of almost $4 million. A lot of that money came from parents who paid anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000 to adopt a child. And when parents didn't have the money, they often turned to their church. Evangelical Christian churches are especially active in international adoptions.
I think that most of the evangelical churches are well-intended. I think that they want to help kids in ways that are admirable. But unfortunately, and this goes to the issue of training and expertise, they're not knowledgeable about adoption. They don't understand the big picture. They're sometimes allowing their eagerness to evangelize kids and sort of save souls overtake the sort of common sense that we need to be engaging in this issue.
Some adoption agencies quote the Bible when promoting adoption.
If God loves you and told us to give that love to others.
But critics say the agencies aren't always about altruism alone, because some of them are also looking after themselves.
There was a time when I felt that I was really marketing and recruiting families for kids, and I was really, really conflicted with that.
Melanie Chung Sherman worked at Dillon International, another large adoption agency. She ran the office in Dallas, Texas, and helped match children and families. She's speaking out now for the first time about what she sees as an industry that's too centered on money.
When you put money, and huge sums of money, and you combine that with placement, there's a huge breadth for corruption and things that happen, and it's not okay. And it never was okay. That was never how adoption was even intended to be. And the victims of this are the adoptees, the first families, and adoptive parents.
She says the problem started when prospective parents showed interest, and she couldn't disclose too much about the risks of adopting.
It wasn't overt, because I never felt it was, don't ever say that. But it was more of, at least in trainings and different things, it was more covert in terms of, you know, you need to say this, but let's try to find a way to sanitize. My argument back to that was, if it scares somebody away, that's probably a positive thing.
Sherman left Dillon International in 2008. She now counsels parents and children whose adoptions are in crisis.
I still believe in adoption, but I also believe in transparency. For every adoption that I was a part of that ended in disruption or disillusion, or families that ended in divorce, or things that I could not perceive or know, I'm responsible. I'm accountable. I'm accountable to those adoptees.
It has been a bittersweet journey for the Steinhoff children, and now Addie and Samuel are thinking of what's next in their lives. They're both now working part-time jobs. Their main priority is returning to Ethiopia and long-awaited reunions with their birth parents.
I want to tell my dad that I really miss him and I love him to death. Like, he's the only reason he's like one of the reasons I'm still going and, like, you know, not giving up yet, so.
But one thing that's kept me and keep me positive every day is my birth mom, more than anything. She's the one that told me, you're gonna be okay. And we're okay, we're doing good, we'll pray for you.
When we found Addie's mother, Almaze, she told us that she's been tormented ever since her daughter left. She says her dream is to see Addie again. So we found a shop near her village that had an internet connection. For the first time in many years, they saw each other face to face.
She's coming, she's coming. Here is your mother. Come on. ይናገሩ
ሰናይ
ሰላም ሰላም ይበላል።
ሰላም አለ በሕይወት
አይዞት ወላ አድርገው ይናገሩ።
ስሚ አቺ አሎ
Can you try your language?
After years in America, Addie has all but forgotten her native language.
You go on saying in English, I'll translate to her. Sister is going to join her now. ድምጻችሁን በመስማቴ መልካችሁን በማየቴ እቻትልሽ እህትሽም ደግሞ ቁጭ በሉ ቁጭ በሉ
ሰላም ነሽ?
Sanai, she's saying, are you okay? Are you doing fine?
We're doing good. I'm doing really good. How are you guys?
They are fine, they are fine.
I am so happy you're doing good. And I'm doing good too. I want to see the baby. Who is that?
This is a young boy of your sister. His name is Samuel. He's a boy.
I am so happy that you guys are doing well, and I'm gonna see you guys someday. You wonderful woman, wonderful daughter. She is amazing. She is doing very well in school.
Tonight, your mother is saying that may God bless your mother. And she's appreciating for whatever you have done to my daughter. She's blessing you in her local language. Just listen to her.
Wow, I couldn't believe that was her. And when I saw her face, it was her, and it just brought all the tears and memories, and I don't know, all the thing that I did with them, and just the love, and it just tearing me down, and I just cried.
We were able to help Nagase reconnect with his children as well. It was the first time since they left.
Good morning.
It's 12 o'clock at night right here.
Could you throw Daddy a kiss?
And then not you.
How are you?
We're all doing good. What do you think when you see him? What's your daddy?
I think I love you.
I love you too.
ስለአሁኑ ቤተሰቦቻችሁ በጣም ነው ደስ ያለኝ።
I'm glad about your new family, and I hope God will be on your side and on my side. I hope one day, me and you, we may see face to face.
Amen. Hey, they want to stay. Come here.
Bye.
Bye.
በጣም ደስ ብሎኛል።
very
happy. I'm very happy. አመሰግናለሁ።
I thank you all a lot. May God bless you.
The Steinhoff children have adjusted to life in America. There have been many moments of happiness, and they say they're grateful to have parents that love them. Their mother, Rana, has a message for adoptive parents who have given up.
I can't imagine ever losing them and letting them go. If you would have hung in there, you would have had all of what I've got right now. And they're worth it. They're worth toughing it out, you know. They really are.
But the reality is, not all parents are able to remain committed to the adopted children. And for those who are not, few want to discuss it. But we did find one who has a lot to say about the children she gave up. That's just ahead at the top of the hour as our investigation continues. While many experts in the field believe international adoptions are failing in large numbers, we've been hard-pressed to find parents who've given up adopted children and were willing to talk about it. That's not the case with Joyce Maynard. She is a best-selling author with over a dozen books to her name. She's also a former journalist who gained notoriety because of her relationship with the author J.D. Salinger, which she wrote about in a memoir entitled At Home in the World. But there is one story that she has not told in full until now. The story of her failed adoption of two girls from Ethiopia. Well, first of all, thank you very much for doing this.
I've given it a lot of thought. Thank you for making this story available to the people who need to hear it.
Well, let's begin easily. In your own words, the story of your effort to adopt two children from Ethiopia.
Yes. I've looked forward to telling it to you, actually. I have not told this story before, and I have no book to sell. And there's no reason, really, except that I feel this story should be known and understood. I loved being a parent, and it was the one thing I felt I had really totally succeeded at. I really knew what I was doing. That's what I believed. And I found myself alone, unattached in my 50s, living in California now. I'd left New Hampshire, and bereft. And I felt I still had great health, lots of energy, and I wanted to I didn't need to replicate myself. I didn't need to have babies anymore. But I felt there were children out in the world that I could love and take care of. And so I began to explore adoption.
Well, what led you to Ethiopia?
I actually looked at lots of different countries, and Ethiopia was, at the time, it was one of the places that was more possible to adopt. It shifts, you know, from year to year. I contacted an agency and made my situation known, my age, my profession, namely that I have no salary, no dependable income. My income varied enormously, always has, and that I was single. And they said, great. And about 3 days later, I had a photograph of 2 particular children in my inbox.
These are the 2 girls that you wound up adopting.
Yes. I had been told that they were 6 and 9, sisters whose mother had died of AIDS some years before, and whose father was HIV positive and had relinquished them.
So you go to Ethiopia and you pick them up.
Yes.
What were your hopes for these girls as you brought them back to our beloved United States
Yes.
of America?
You know, I wanted them to be free to live their lives. I wanted them just to live their lives, number one, to survive. I wanted them to feel safe, something that I knew they had not probably ever felt. I wanted them to be fed, to be healthy. It was sort of very basic things, to have school. They hadn't really had school, but big problem. They didn't speak English. The younger of my daughters went to kindergarten, and although the other kids had had a lot that she hadn't had, of course, they were at the beginning level. And she was happy and loving school and doing great. The older one, who I already knew was not 9 years old, was older. Nobody had a birth certificate. Nobody had anybody saying how old they were. She was put in 4th grade. A bright girl, bright, proud girl, who could write in Amharic. And then she comes and suddenly she's illiterate, and she's in class with all these Mill Valley kids who've had every conceivable kind of privilege. You know, I'm going to say this more than once, because one misconception, perhaps, about failed adoption is that it fails because there's something wrong with the child. You know, this child, maybe for very understandable reasons, the child has been through horrific experiences, and certainly there are children who are, you know, violent, out of control. I would say none of this is wrong with them. It's wrong with what happened in their lives. But actually, my girls were the survivor girls. They were the ones who had made it this far. They were really strong, brave, athletic, but operating, you know, in this other planet.
So what went wrong? And when did you know it was wrong?
Well, there's a honeymoon period. First, they just hug you and tell you they love you. And then they start being real, which is what you want a child to be able to do. And then there was an enormous amount of rage. And there was only one person to direct it to, and that was me.
How did that rage manifest itself?
You know, I'm keenly aware of the fact that someday the girls who used to be my daughters will hear me say this. So I want to make it very plain. It was so understandable, but there were physical battles that had me dripping with sweat. My older daughter was really angry and fierce. She would do things like walk out of the house and just walk away, like go away, and I would have to go find her. I would say, you can't go to school wearing that outfit. And school was 3 miles away. She would walk. And I would come after her and say, you can't.
Did she or did she not throw tantrums?
I don't want to say she threw tantrums. I want to say that she was in pain. And in fact, more than that, I would say what she was sometimes was silent. She wouldn't look at me. I never knew it could hurt so much to have somebody not look you in the eye.
It will strike many people as what you described as, you know, just about normal for a teenager, sure. Perhaps particularly for a teenage girl. What made it so hard that it became untenable?
And that's, of course, a question that has to be asked, and a good one. I've raised 3 teenagers, grown now, but I was not unfamiliar with anger, opposition, trouble, you know, moments that my children said, you know, I hate you, you know, all of those things. that comes with the territory. It's probably, a necessary developmental phase. I always knew, even when they were really angry with me, when they stomped out of the house, or whatever they would do, or acted out, I knew that they regarded me as their mother, and that we were a family in their eyes.
This is with your birth children?
My birth children, yes. What I believe happened with my girls is that they, specifically because I was saying I was their mother, they were angry at me. I think I recognized within a couple of months that I was not who they needed. And I certainly recognized that this was more than I ever imagined, and in spite of my supposed research. But at the same time that I recognized that, I did not give a thought to not standing by my commitment. I felt I have taken responsibility for 2 children who have been abandoned in the world. I must and will stand by them no matter what, even if it means that my life as I knew it, or any even particularly healthy life for me, is over. And that began to happen pretty soon because I couldn't work. I've always been a really healthy person, and I wasn't anymore. I really got sick. I won't say that any of these are an excuse, but I think I was just so depleted. I saw that I wasn't going to be able to afford my house anymore, so I began to look for another place that we could live that would be cheaper. I thought about moving back to the East Coast, where I had more of a support system. My daughter was there, but I was really trying just to get through the days. And I began to look for other things and people in our life that would help. We went to therapy. A therapist who was an adoptive parent of a child of another race, and who was a specialist in adoption. We could have been having the biggest fight in the car, where she would barely get out of the car, and we'd go into the room, and her little sister would go and start playing with all the toys, because they always have toys, and she would just sit there angry and glaring, and the therapist would say, how are things? And she'd say, fine, good. She's a wonderful runner. And so I tried to run with her. I just thought, well, we'll just run. We'll just run a whole lot. And I happened to find on Craigslist a young woman who was training for the Olympics as a long-distance runner and was looking for a place to live. And I said, come move into our house and just run with my daughter. Yeah. She got into a terrible fight with the runner. And the fight was so bad that her face froze. Her face locked. She got Bell's palsy. Now I know the name of it. Oh. And she came home, and half of her face looked as if she'd had a stroke. We're speaking of a beautiful young girl who's already uncomfortable at school. And now her face is like this. And I took her to a doctor, and we began to treat her for the Bell's palsy. And she was, of course, angry about that. And sometimes it'd be called down to school, and they'd say, she's collapsed, she needs to go to the emergency room. There was nothing that they found when we went to the emergency room, but she was crying out. She was sending me a message.
That message was?
Something has to change.
Joyce Maynard's story of rehoming her own daughters will continue in a moment. Best-selling author Joyce Maynard had lived through what she described as a difficult first year with her adopted Ethiopian daughters. She picks up the story on a visit to her therapist.
One day in the therapy, and I come alone to the therapist, she says to me, "You know, Joyce, sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes you have to give them up." And when she said that, I put my hands over my ears and I said to her, "No, no, no, I don't even want to hear this. It's off the table. It's not a possibility." And this is important to say because even as I have been so hurt by the amount of judging that I have received, I understand why people would judge a person who gives up a child, because I would have judged a person who gave up a child. I judged myself. Unthinkable. You adopt an orphan from Ethiopia and then you send her away? You say you're going to be her mother and then you say, "I guess I'm not"? No. But I did keep going to the therapist and I did listen to her. And she began to tell me that this happened a lot, something I had never heard about in all the research I'd done.
But you didn't want to believe that.
I didn't want to. It was, you know, there are some things that you just say are unacceptable. And this, I was a person who always made it work.
Now, when you found yourself in the situation spiraling downward, did you reach out to the agency for help?
I did.
And were they helpful?
No.
Particularly with time to think about it and reflect upon it. Was there something of what the real estate people call buyer's remorse involved in this decision?
Tough question, fair question. Buyer's remorse takes place when you acquire something, when you take an object or possession into your life and you decide you don't like it. That's not what happened.
That's not what happened?
That's not what happened.
At least at first blush, there would be the people who say that's exactly what happened.
The remorse was over not the discovery of who they were, but who I could not be. Very different. I don't know who the child would have been that would have been the one that I could have raised the way they deserved to be at that moment. I discovered about myself, very hard lesson, that, and you can feel free to judge me for this, I'll admit to it, I was not strong enough for this very demanding task.
You must remember the day that you decided,
Yes.
I have to go in a different direction.
Yes, I do. I have a very dear friend in Guatemala who's an American nun, and I called her and I said, "Chris, I need your help. You, of all people, you know about self-sacrifice. And here am I saying, I can't do this." And she said, "Self-sacrifice, yes, Joyce. Self-destruction, no." But had it been simply my own self-destruction, I might have stayed on with it. I saw, and this is a fortunate thing for all of us, most of all the girls, that they were making it plain. It wasn't working. I acknowledge that I could not continue to give to the level that they would have needed for as long as they would have needed and have survived. It's very painful. You love these children, you know, that's not in question, but they're not, it's not easy enough to say just they don't love you. They can't trust love yet. How could they, given what they've lived through? Someday, yes, but not yet. And so...
Not yet and not with you.
And not with me, not with me.
Take me back to the moment. How did you tell the girls and how did they react?
Well, it's a two-pronged thing. You can make the decision, yes, they need somebody else. Then try finding that family. There is no website you go to for that. There is no nice social agency. There are plenty of adoption agencies ready to take your check and your file, but try to find somebody, some agency that will help you, including your own adoption agency. Forget it. I began quietly to search.
At this point, they don't know.
They don't know. And the conventional wisdom, and it was mine, was that of course I would not tell them until I could tell them something good too. But you know, that's not what I did. I said to them, you know, when I went to Ethiopia to bring you home, and I met all your friends and all your family in Ethiopia, I made them a promise that you would have a good life in the United States of America. And you will have a good life in the United States of America. And I believe that you need some things, and I'm going to get them for you. Of course, I made it simpler. I said, I think you need a dad. And I think you need other kids in the family. And I think you need a mom that is always home and always there. And they didn't argue with any of that. And they didn't cry. We actually had a really good night that night. We made popcorn and we watched a movie. And I won't say that it stayed like that, because they had to separate from me. They had to disconnect from me, and they had to be angry at me. But when I think about, you know, all the people who didn't understand this and who still don't understand this and who may never understand this, the girls understood. That night, they really understood.
Question. Let me gently but directly challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
What are the chances that's what you want to believe?
Mm-hmm. Fair question.
But is not, in fact, the case with girls?
Did I want to believe this? Yes, I did want to believe this. Would it have been more painful if they had clung to me and said, no, 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 don't let us go? Absolutely, it would have been.
So how and when did you find a new family for them?
I quietly began to write to adoptive parents, and one who I'd befriended in Ethiopia, it's a wonderful American woman, she reminded me of the man who had come. I had not met him, but who had come shortly after I had come that first visit to meet the girls. He and his wife had adopted 2 children from that orphanage. And she said, you know what? They still ask about the girls. They were very religious, and church was a big part of their life, and I thought that was great. That was one of the many things I could not give the girls. The girls had come from a tradition of that. They had a huge support system in their town. They had all the grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, and church, all there.
Were you afraid, were you scared to turn the 2 children that you had brought to this country over to another family?
I actually felt that this was probably the best thing I did in my 14 months as a failed adoptive mother. This was the best of me, that I did that I found them, that family. If there's any way that I think I could most accurately describe my role, it was as a foster parent. That I was the buffer. I was the person who absorbed their response to all the shock and horror of everything that they'd gone through. And I'd like to think, I'm sure it's not as simple as then it was over and they went to their new home and they could be happy all-American kids, but I'm actually very optimistic that they are going to have that. I believe that is possible. But and if that was my role, then I'm okay with that.
What is your contact with the girls now, and how are they doing?
I have no contact with them. And that was very sad for a very long time. And I was surprised by it. I thought I, sent a present on their birthday and sent cards, and then I thought, well, I'll talk to their parents and I'll get reports. And I don't get any reports either. And I do not judge for that. I do not judge them, because whatever it is that they need to make things work is okay with me. I do believe, however, that I will see them one day, and that will be their call. That will be their call to choose. It's not for me to seek them out, but I will be ready whenever that moment is, whether it's in 5 years or 10 or 20.
That's Joyce Maynard's story. We contacted the new family to see how the girls were doing. They're living in another state and asked us not to reveal where. But in a statement, the mother said the girls have, quote, experienced unimaginable grief and continue to relive that grief every day. Again quoting, adoption agencies and families need to be held to a much higher level of accountability, she wrote. My children were wronged, but I must give them time to understand their own feelings and be able to tell their own story, not mine. We'll be right back. America has a strong history of adoption. Perhaps most famously in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when so-called orphan trains brought tens of thousands of children who were often abandoned on the streets of New York to wanting families in the Midwest and Southwest. In a rapidly growing country, families out west often needed the help in the farms and fields. It is no small irony that some of those cities, which took in hungry children more than a century ago from the orphan trains, are seeing abandoned children again. This time, it's young people who in some cases were international adoptees, ending up in homeless shelters. Our investigation has uncovered that while it is traumatic for children to move from family to family, it's not the worst-case scenario.
It exhausts kids to be without a home, to not be able to relax and just be who they are, to constantly be worrying, where am I going to be tonight? Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to get my next meal?
Janet Holloway runs the Bridge for Youth, a shelter in Minneapolis. In the last 18 months, nearly 20 international adoptees have shown up at their doors. And there could be more, but no one knows because it's not routine for social workers to ask about adoption.
At first, we weren't aware that there was an issue with international adoptees. But when we took a harder look, we realized that there were a sizable number of kids here at the Bridge who had been internationally adopted. And when we went back and looked at the case notes, there clearly was a pattern.
Bharat Kelly was one of those children. He was adopted from an orphanage in India when he was 5 years old.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I was born in New Delhi, India. I was actually dropped off at a police station by someone anonymous. They put me in the orphanage, and I was there for 5 years until an American family came from Minnesota, and they adopted me.
Look down. Kiss your mom, Katie. Oh, look at him. Oh, my God.
But like so many internationally adopted children, Bharat's parents didn't turn out to be a forever family. At first, all was well.
Katie, you might have to show him. I don't know if he's ever done that. She'll have to show him.
But as Bharat got older, problems began.
I used to just get into fits and tantrums and rage and just scream at the top of my lungs, and they would take me outside and they said, well, just let off your steam outside. We don't want to hear that in the house.
He became jealous of the attention that his parents gave their biological daughter. He remembers them arguing over how to deal with him. Finally, after 7 years in their home, Bharat's parents packed him up and shipped him back to India.
She sat in the living room chair and she said these words, I hope someday you will change, but I highly doubt it.
He was 12 years old.
I just went through a whole big emotional toll that I would rather die than go through that again.
He never saw them again. Bharat spent 6 years at a Christian boarding school that his parents paid for. After he graduated from high school, he came back to the United States because, as a U.S. citizen, he no longer had a visa to stay in India. When he returned, he was in touch with his parents.
I was trying to reconnect the family again and say, hey, I'm a new person, let's make this happen again. Let's be a family again. But unfortunately, they didn't want that. In fact, they divorced like when I was in 10th grade. My mom would pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what you've done in our lives, and you've screwed up our lives, so I don't want you calling again. That was the last phone call, actually.
He had no money and nowhere to go, and that's how he ended up living at a homeless shelter. Bharat's adoptive mother sent us an email that reads in part, he has not once asked to get together with me. I felt if he wanted a relationship with either my husband or I, he would ask to see us. She also wrote, he was a wanted child. Bharat is now 20 years old. He lives alone in an apartment that is subsidized by a program for homeless youth.
A child is not a product. It's not a defect. It's not a defect in which you could just send it back to the manufacturer and said, hey, this is not what I paid for.
It feels like such a disservice to the child and who they are as a human being. I think that's how I feel when I hear stories like Bharat's. Every human being should be treated with dignity, should have love, safety, a family, and I think when things don't work out and a child has no place to turn, we as a community need to provide support.
Bharat can only stay in this apartment for a few more months. After that, he doesn't know where he'll go or how he'll afford to pay his rent, because he's only working part-time in a grocery store making $8 an hour.
All right, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Soon, he could end up homeless.
This is Hannah. Hannah's a little bit emotional. She's done this before. Hannah, how old are you? 10 years old. And what grade are you in at school? Grade 7, good.
In the world of international adoption, there may be no more tragic story than that of Hannah Williams, who lived near Seattle, Washington. The young girl was adopted to this country from Ethiopia in 2008, when she was 10 years old. But on May 11, 2011, Hannah was found dead in her backyard. She had bruises on her body where she had been beaten, but that's not what killed her. Hannah's parents had starved her to death. They were convicted and sentenced for the crime. The mother was put away for 37 years and the father for 28. Hannah's adoption was facilitated by AAI, Adoption Advocates International. While that agency helped bring thousands of children here from around the world, it shut down after Hannah's story came to light. The agency was based in the Seattle area and was one of the first in the U.S. to put through adoptions of Ethiopian children. But there is another adoption tale involving children brought here by AAI that some adoption experts say is equally as stunning as Hannah's story. Some of these adoptees have ended up homeless. One of them is Belanish Hain.
It just made me feel like I'm this horrible kid nobody wants. Like, that's how I felt like. One thing that I always wanted was a parent, you know, somebody who could be a mother figure to me.
And Miss Rock and Stella and Amanel and Tom.
I always say that I am a mother to many, not T-O-O, but T-O.
Belanish is the adopted daughter of Richard and Julia Hain. Their desire to help children has been featured on local newscasts that say they have 28 adopted children, most of them from Ethiopia.
And I'm Abraham.
And people say, oh, it's such a great thing you do. And I say, oh, no, it's such a great thing I get to do. It is so wonderful.
People think she's this perfect mom who brings this orphan kids. It's not like that. People think she's like a Mother Teresa, but she's not.
The children say life at home was very different than it appeared to the outside world.
The hitting went a lot, and they try to be very sneaky about it. You know, there's some days I don't feel safe at the house, a lot of days, because, you know, out of nowhere she will come and you don't know whether she's in a good mood or not. And she just takes her anger out on me.
Several people called Child Protective Services on Belanish's behalf, including a teacher who recalls Belanish trembling anytime she mentioned her adoptive mother's name. Belanish tried to run away from home on many occasions, and eventually, at age 15, her mother left her at a homeless shelter.
It just felt like I was unwanted by her, so thanks. Like basically, she just gave me away to them.
The one place that Belanish found refuge from her adoptive family is a small Ethiopian church where she confided in the pastor.
These are children with no voice. I have to do what I have to do. And it was sad because the very family that brought them here was the one that was victimizing them.
Pastor Baranu insisted that we meet an older brother whose situation is even worse. He lives in Everett, a city in the suburbs of Seattle that has one of the highest crime rates in the state.
It's basically my belonging. There's a blanket. That's my friend's backpack.
This is Abe Hain, Belanish's older brother. He sleeps here every night, next to a busy highway, along with many of the city's drug addicts.
I don't feel safe sleeping on the street, but that's what I can do right now.
Abe is 23 years old, and he's been homeless for the past year.
On the street. I walk a lot. Think a lot. I worry a lot. My head just spins. I get migraine like constantly. My chest, my neck. My whole body, I can't stand. It's just weak.
He comes to a cemetery for peace and quiet, and to escape the stress of life on the streets. How did Abe get here? That's him in the news clip from 2009. It's been a long and complicated road, but Abe says life with the Haynes was hell.
My dad would sit on top of my sister and just, you know, pull her hair back, and my mom would smack her around. And yeah, I wish I would have done some, you know, because, you know, she means a lot to me. That's my youngest sister.
One day, Abe says, he called 911, and after that, he says his relationship with his adoptive mother went downhill. Several months later, she accused him of having sex with an adopted sister.
Well, this happened. I was getting ready to go to school. I was in the shower, and my dad knocked on the door and saying, the cops want to talk to you. And I said, okay. So I dressed up, and I'm about to go to school. I'm junior in high school. So I go upstairs. The first thing the cop told me was, you touch your sister inappropriate. That's what he told me.
Abe admitted that he touched her breasts and behind, but insisted they never had sex. The two were not biologically related at the time he was 17 and she was 14.
He's not a criminal. I have seen bad kids. And as a 17-year-old boy, staying in a house where there are about 30 children taking care of themselves with no parents around, if young men, young girls are staying there, things like this happen.
There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. But Abe says he was scared of going to prison for a long time, so he pled guilty to a lesser charge.
I didn't know what's going on. I had a public attender saying this is what I could do, and she told me sign this paper and everything will be all right. So I don't know what's going on. I signed the paper.
Abe was charged as an adult and served 14 months in prison. When he got out, he had nowhere to turn. He now had a criminal record and was a registered sex offender. His only option was sleeping on the streets.
When an adoption is going awry and a family is trying to figure out what they're going to do, they will oftentimes discover that doing a voluntary relinquishment of the child into, say, foster care will sometimes require that they pay child support or have an expense of some kind. Conversely, if they make a criminal allegation against the child for assault or some other kind of misconduct, there's no expense attached to that. So making an allegation, especially of sexual misconduct, has become sort of a hot button way to make everything go away, because immediately the child is either in the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system. There's no expense involved, and it's over. And I've seen it used as a technique over and over again.
No one has accused the Haynes of using this tactic to get rid of their children, but we reached out to Julia and Richard Hayne for comment. They declined, but the local precinct had a lot to show us. Police reports from the Hayne house total 130 pages. Everything from alleged beatings to suicide attempts and, quote, child currently locked by deadbolt in their room with plywood covering the windows. Maureen flatly believes that the Haynes' multiple adoptions should never have been allowed.
You know, how much supervision were those kids getting? You know, you have kids that certainly in a family like that don't have any biological connection to each other. So they're not thinking brother and sister, they're just thinking boy and girl. And now the young man who was accused of the activity is a convicted sex offender, is, you know, effectively homeless, and probably really didn't have a clear understanding of what was going on. So, you know, is it really fair that he's been cast out the way he has?
I feel like, why is this happening to me? You know, I lost my family, I came here, I got discharged, and now I'm on the street, and I don't know what's gonna happen next. It's just what I'm going through. No one should be able to go through.
When I go there and I see him, it tears me up because it's not him. That's not his character. It just hurts me because I know who he is, and it hurts a lot to see him going through that, sleeping on the street, I worry a lot, like what if somebody hurts him one day, you know?
He's a lot different than what he used to be. He used to have more spirit. He used to be one of the best soccer players at Woodway. And now seeing him the way he is, I'm like, what's my future gonna be look like? So.
And you still have the same address?
Yeah, just put a number of the after the beep.
Samuel Hain is 17 years old.
Yeah.
I need to have references.
The children say he will become the 9th adopted child to get kicked out of the Hain house.
Sometimes I go at night, then there's a park by our house. I sleep there because maybe I might be homeless and I want to get the feeling of how that feels like, you know. And that's about it. I don't know what the future is going to hold for me, and if being homeless is one of the things, and I want to be prepared, you know. I like being prepared for what's coming up.
Samuel was also adopted from Ethiopia and grew up in the Hain household with Belanish and Abe. He has been living in an apartment on his own that his adoptive mother rents for him. But in 3 weeks, he will turn 18, and after that, his mother will cut him off.
I feel angry that with so many resources, so much wealthy people around here, nobody looks into the kids who are actually getting adopted and, you know, what happens to their life, you know, so.
Belanish is now 21. While she's not on the street, she does not have a permanent home and moves from house to house.
Be careful, baby.
She often stays with her older sister Mimi and her 2 children.
Really strong.
Mimi was also kicked out of the Hain house.
To adopt 30 children, bring them over to the United States and turn them loose on the street and have them, this is sad. This should be stopped. No government should allow this to happen. And this is not acceptable. This is inhuman.
All I want was my mom and dad. That's all I needed. I just want to go back to my country and die in my country. I don't want to die in somebody's country. I don't know why I came here. I had everything. I was free. I was happy back when I was. And now my life is, I guess, I don't have none. I give up.
For parents in crisis with their adopted children, there are alternatives to internet chat rooms and message boards. Hope for families before they reach the breaking point.
You swing more than anybody else in our family.
Meet Michael Monroe and his wife Amy of Dallas. They've been through tough times, survived it, and now want to help others.
Go! Go to do it!
The Monroes adopted 4 children. 2 came from Guatemala, and it wasn't long before they realized they were in for a challenge.
We walked into adoption well-intentioned, but rather blind, rather ignorant, to be honest. And I can see that now, but it wasn't obvious then. And what we've come to realize with all of our kids is that we've got some very unique and unusual elements to us. One of our kiddos that came to us through international adoption has had some real health concerns and persistent health problems. You say, okay, well, lots of families deal with that. But we could never get a diagnosis, and we didn't have any medical history.
The unexpected challenges inspired the Monroes to get a group of adoptive parents together so they could swap stories and share experiences.
A family that comes to us and they're using what we call the D words. They're using the word disruption, they're using the word disillusion, they're using the word done. right? And they're depleted. They don't have, oftentimes, anything emotionally left to give. What has been interesting is that some, not all, but some families who think they're done simply didn't know there were answers. They didn't know anybody else in the whole world, much less in their community, was experiencing the same exact thing or maybe worse. And that there were answers, and that they would walk with them and talk with them and listen to them and cry with them and pray with them. They didn't know that. And in some cases, simply knowing that and being connected to someone changes everything. What do they believe about themselves? Unwanted, stupid, not good enough.
The Monroes have since formed Tapestry Ministry to offer adoptive parents education and training. They run workshops and connect parents with trauma specialists.
It's never all about the kid, because that's not what a family is. A family is a dynamic, it's a system. It's never all about one person. And so what we want to help them do is look at it holistically. Yes, those challenges are real. Yes, those behaviors are troubling. Yes, those needs are pronounced. But there's more going on. We want to help them understand that, hey, just removing that child from this equation is not going to solve everything.
The Monroes have brought their training program to more than 100 churches across the United States, and they want to keep growing. They believe that communities need to step up and prevent adoptions from failing and ensure that parents have realistic expectations before adopting.
I don't think anybody in the adoption community has probably done a good enough job at helping to paint a realistic picture and to prepare families to be able to love not just any child, but these kids with these histories well. I just don't think that. And I think that falls not only on the shoulder of agencies, I think it falls on the shoulder of social workers and social service organizations. I think it falls on the shoulders of churches and movements to promote adoption. I think it falls on the shoulders of moms and dads who walk the adoption journey and who tell their stories less than honestly, less than fully, because the stories are filled with hope and reality. And there's a tension in there, blessing and joy as well as challenges and pain. And I think that everybody in the community of adoption needs to take inventory about how we can better serve those who are going to walk behind us.
And finally, based on our investigation, we'd like to leave you with these thoughts. Americans adopt more children, domestically and internationally, than all the other countries in the world combined. We have long been a nation which deeply cherishes children and family. And in the last generation, world events such as the collapse of the Soviet Union, the one-child policy in China, and economic instability in Africa have brought hundreds of thousands of new children to waiting families here in America. But in the last few years, the number of international adoptions has fallen dramatically. That's in part because of some of the incidents you've seen tonight. In 2012, for example, Ethiopia suspended adoptions from some agencies after Hannah Williams' murder. And as if to highlight the severity of the problem, we now have this. It's a video and a website devoted to helping internationally adopted children know their rights. For example, that no one is allowed to hit children or deny them food, water, or shelter. The website also lists a phone number for children who are having problems, want to report abuse, or just need to talk. We'll have that number and web address on our Facebook page, along with more information on international adoptions. And that's our program for tonight. As always, you can tell us what you think by checking us out on Facebook and Twitter, or emailing us at viewer@access.tv. For Access TV, from New York, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.